Another episode of the On Fire podcast. Another one of our favorite guests, friend of the show, John Conniff of MadFriars, joining us to let us know who we need to know about from this new look. Top 30 of the folks at MadFriars are churning out as they do every winter. He is Derek Togerson. I am Darnay Tripp, and Derek counting down anxiously to January 15th, I think, like the rest of us. How are you, Derek?
Waiting for January 15th. Also, I'm very interested to talk to John about which players we're going to be talking about as soon as they were involved in the Garrett Crochet trade. That's how they'll forever be known, because they won't do a whole lot else at Major League Baseball.
Who is left to deplete the system with? We will find out on this episode with the always informative, always jovial and fun to catch up with John Conniff. Thanks for being with us. As always, thanks to OG's, the sponsor of the On Friar podcast. Whatever your sport of choice is, if you want to go somewhere, have a good meal, have a drink or two, catch a ball game, NBA, NHL, college football Saturdays, NFL Sundays. OG's is a place to do it. Always updating their beer list. Lots of great specials, or I should say their menu and their beer list. Lots of great specials to take advantage of. And so, again, next time you want to catch a ball game, get a good meal, go to one of the many OG's locations throughout San Diego County. Appreciate all they do for us on NBC7 and the On Friar podcast. Without further ado, the walk-up music. It is the On Fire podcast, brought to you by NBC7. He is Derek Togerson. I am Darnay Tripp. We are full steam ahead in the off season, but a slowish week. Some things to talk about, but no real movement. And it is top 30 season for the folks at MadFriars. So we thought, why not bring in the elder statesman of the MadFriars crew, John Conniff, one of our favorites, checking in from the basement in DC with a younger, less handsome version of John Conniff behind him in the Poway jersey. Oh, there he is.
There it is.
That guy will get you 20 and 10 in a heartbeat.
You know what I wonder, John? That is like you're in between smile and not smile there, which is you got to commit to one.
Like
I mean, I think the only time I got 20 and 10 in my life was probably over about a 10-game span. So, I mean, that's probably why I was not committing to that. I was really skinny back then. I was about an inch and a half shorter, too. I was about 6'1.5", and I weighed about 150 pounds, and I had much longer hair. I looked like a Q-tip running down the court. So, I mean, in the short shorts and floppy hair. So it was kind of fun times.
You hadn't discovered chicken fried steak yet.
I don't think they had gel back then or hair thing, so that's why it was kind of out there floppy.
Well, John, I appreciate you reaching out, and we got the John Conniff edition of the Padres Top 30, MadFriars Top 30, and so there's I was curious about the 2023 list. I mean, there were so many names. Now, this is, I pulled up Charity's version.
Okay.
Kevin Charity's version from last January. Number 1, Jackson Merrill. Jackson Merrill is still around, but, no longer, I think, in your prospect rankings. He is an established big leaguer. Dylan Lesko, Victor Lizarraga is still around. Samuel Zavala, no longer still around.
Yep.
You got Eggy on there. Robbie Snelling no longer still around. Adam Major no longer still around. Noel Vela. What's Noel Vela up to? Joshua Mears. Jay Groom no longer still around. Henry Williams. Pedro Avila no longer still around. I know there's some others. Jairo Uriarte.
Noel Vela retired. He just had too many arm problems. And also to ding Kevin a little bit, Kevin in 2024 went for Ethan Salas as number 1 and Jackson Merrill number 2. Well, the rest of us kind of stayed true to Jackson and went number 1. So we can ding Kevin on that a little bit.
But what if he turns out to be right?
I mean,
which basically means that Ethan Salas is a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Well, there's still a chance that I could make the NBA, but it's probably unlikely. I'll say that.
So it's a different looking list, and like any year, there's a lot of excitement around the top two. In past years, there's been more intrigue. I mean, I guess last year you had the top four with Snelling and Lesko. But there is I think, a considerable drop off from Salas and Vries, just in terms of like awareness of these guys, understanding like who they are, where they're at, and what they're capable of. And so a good time to check in with you. And I figured, maybe you have some thoughts on Roki Sasaki. How do you feel about them throwing their entire international pool at a guy that you might never get a chance to cover with MadFriars? That'd be disappointing.
Well, I'm more of I love doing MadFriars a lot. We've been over 20 years, but I'm more of a Padres fan. So I'd be fine taking Roki Sasaki, with all the money. And I would say, just real quick, if someone's listening and going, give me like a 30-second appraisal of the top 30, I would say this: that there's two highly thought of teenagers who right now have more projection than they actually do production. There could be some really good young pitching prospects in Lake Elsinore, which would be right up I-15. And, there's a couple guys who are at AA or higher that, kind of have a lot of variance in how well they could or could not help the Padres, which I'm sure we'll get into during this episode. But, I think, as I wrote in the beginning, when you look at lists this year, the Padres are going to definitely be in the bottom third. That doesn't mean that's where they're going to be mid-season, and it doesn't mean that's where they're going to be at the end of the year. And these prospect rankings are kind of just a point in time where different guys are, because, this is always a big blend of projection and ceiling and performance, and that's why you try to have some type of blend. And all four of us are going to have pretty much around the same list on about the top 10. The guys will be there at different rankings. There'll be a lot more variance between numbers 20 through 30. And, you'll see David J talking about how he's impressed with some kid's body language in the DSL. And I don't know, all this psychological BS, but we'll let David explain that.
Psychological BS is always, that should go on the back of a baseball card.
Yeah.
That should be a stat line. It should be like OPS, slug, on bay OBP, PBS, psychological bull stuff.
Well, speaking of that phrase, we'll talk about, like we were chatting about a little bit before this started, is, when prospect guys come on, they tell both you and Derek, is you'll point out, like, hey, if you take away Ethan Salas's 1 month in July in Lake Elsinore, he's got a 202 average over 2 seasons. And I'll sit there and I can lecture you guys that you're scouting the stat line and that my unnamed scouts see all this. And he's going to be, by 2028, hitting 30 home runs and be an all-star. But, you just got to kind of trust me. And I think that the tough thing is a lot of the stuff you don't know when you're kind of playing a game of blackjack where you're trying to see what the odds are of someone doing it. A guy you had on last week that I really enjoyed was, I enjoyed Kyle Glazer a lot. And I know Kyle, and, he's a top-notch reporter. But one thing Kyle does really well is he also says what he doesn't know. And he says unknown. Like when he was talking about Sasaki, I thought was really good, is he pointed out that how this is really a good situation for San Diego, because it's not just a pure money game with LA. There's a limit to how much they can bid. So that looks good. Then odds are he knows Darvish very well, and that could help. He also knows Otani and Yamamoto. But, he's pointing out the things that are public that we know, and, the listener or reader, whatever, can kind of come to their own conclusions about how good a chance the Padres do or don't have.
Well, this is the rare situation that the Padres are in a better financial spot than the Dodgers are. They can offer $1.1 million more. Yeah. Which is, and when are we ever going to be able to say that again? Where the Padres literally have more money that they can offer than the Dodgers can.
And potentially even more. If AJ makes a trade, kind of like he did for Humberto Cruz, which is one of our guys, he could possibly acquire some more cap room. But I will say this, just knowing how those guys operate, a little bit, is they've been thinking about this for a while. This is not something that just popped up. They have been planning and looking about where they're going to go. And, they have a great relationship with Darvish. I think that was established last year. They have long ties and going over and scouting in Japan. And, I think with a lot of people, if the National League had had a DH, they would have had a good shot at getting Ohtani a couple of years ago. But
yeah, they would
that's
have.
all. That's not based on reporting. That's just me, what I think and from what I've read and all that.
No, they would have had him. I have zero doubt in my mind. And this is one of those spots where, I mean, this Sasaki kid is such a difference maker, because then when he signs here, then he's subject to, okay, now you make the minimum for 2 years. Now you have arbitration for 3 years. Like he's a guy who, the last guy to do this was Ohtani, where you don't have to give him the Yamamoto, Kodai Senga kind of massive free agent contract. That's why he's so intriguing, because he is, technically so controllable for so long. You can talk about extensions and yada, yada, and long-term contracts, whatever you want to, but it's not going to take that much to get him in the building. And that's what's so incredibly cool. He threw a 19 strikeout perfect game at the age of 20. I mean, it almost reminds me of Steven Strasburg at 21, throwing a 17 strikeout no-hitter in his last start at Tony Gwynn Stadium. Like, it's that kind of dominant stuff that we're talking about here. He's a guy you can dream on.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've read, there's still some stuff that, he can kind of clean up and look at. But, I mean, I don't know. I think it's going to be really fascinating. One thing I'm amazed at is how little people do actually know about what his intentions. He's playing his cards pretty close to the vest, and we'll see. I do think it seems like it's between the Padres and the Dodgers. Jim Bowden's been pretty vocal about how he doesn't think he'll go to the Dodgers, and we'll see if Jim's right.
Well, that's all the Buster Olney thing. 30 of 30 major league executives think he's going to the Dodgers. I guarantee you AJ Preller does not think that. Come on.
29 of 30. 29 of 30.
Yeah, as he's taking Duolingo Japanese lessons, I can imagine, yes.
Yeah, I mean, Bowden's saying there's an 85% chance that it's not the Dodgers. And then you have Sasaki's agent coming out and, speaking out against reports that there's a handshake deal with the Dodgers and saying, how dare you say that I've got, I've agreed to some nefarious kind of, agreement or whatever. Nathan chiming in, he would not be leaving $300 million on the table if he doesn't know where he's going. His decision has been made.
Not sure.
Yeah,
maybe.
I don't know if I know about that. And we'll see. I mean, January 15th. And I think, you make a good point about
what he's going. He's coming to Major League Baseball.
He's coming to Major League Baseball.
Yes.
Yeah. And he'll have a chance to hear out X amount of teams. Kyle mentioning the Cubs being another team. Obviously, they've had some success, drawing some of these guys and signing some of these guys in recent years. But I just, I think one of the things that you mentioned, Kyle, like one of the things that I appreciate about him is he's just like, nobody knows. Let's stop acting like we know, because at this point, like, there's no reason to believe that anybody really has any sort of certainty. And now we have close to 2 months for this thing to kind of get ironed out, and for him to actually get over here, visit these cities, visit these teams, walk around the clubhouse, talk with GMs, talk with potential teammates, that sort of thing. And, I would like to think that, that will have some sway in what his ultimate decision is.
Yeah, I like Jim Bowden a lot too, but I think if you want to be a jerk, you could say, Jim, how did you get to 85% compared to 90 or 80? I mean,
how do you get to that number? It's a little bit of a random number.
It is.
Got to be something to that.
It is.
So yeah, it's it's an interesting thing, and as Derek mentioned, I mean, just kind of the control that you have, and I I just love that it's a situation like this where it's not just like throwing, like Nathan said, $300 million at a guy. He's got potential to eventually make that $300 million, but it being a level playing field, and if the Pirates feel like, hey, we got a chance at this guy, we want to have him visit, like, heck, you got close to as much money as anybody else, like you can throw your hat in the mix as well, which I think is cool.
Well, one thing kind of to respond to what Nathan said too is there have been reports, and I think it was on ESPN and a couple other places, that he wanted to come over last year. It was his team that wouldn't allow him to come over, so he was fine taking the less money last year. I mean, if he was really about the cash and the giant money, he would just wait about, I think, either a year, 2 more years, and then he could come over and he could get the type of deal that Yamamoto is. Because, Derek's right. I mean, he's considered one of the best pitching prospects ever to come out of Japan. And so, I mean, he's a big guy. He has size, fastball, splitter. And, Yeah, I really hope San Diego can get him. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Great stories with him and Darvish working together. You guys would have stories to write and broadcast for years. So on that, so that'd be a great time.
Jacob chiming in. One of the questions with Roki is, will you need to run with the 6-man rotation if he's a Padre, given, there has been some injury history, and, how far do you want to push a guy like we saw with Yamamoto in his first season?
Probably they would, because, I think Darvish would want a six-man rotation. A couple of those guys would. And, the Padres have some guys, which hopefully we'll eventually get to, that they might be able to fill in at some of those back slots. But, yeah, I think it's interesting that people are asking, and you guys all of us are kind of sitting around waiting till January 15th. And the thought of talking about what Ryan Burkert may or may not do kind of dims compared to that. So
we'll try to keep Darvish would like one for sure. It worked out incredibly well for him in 2022. But you look at Sasaki's number last year, 111 innings, 91 innings, 129 a third innings. Like he's stretched out. So you don't have to worry about any kind of usage limitations with him at all. If you would have to if you do go to a 6, because you legitimately have 6 starting pitchers that you like, Mike Schilt kind of had that option a little bit last year and decided to go against it. You got a fully stretched out Michael King. You got a fully stretched out Dylan Cease. You got, hopefully Darvish is there for the entire season. You got Matt Waldron and Randy Vasquez, who can both give you a lot of innings. So do you rely on those? Do you believe those guys can be part of a reliable 6-man rotation? If you have that many options, I don't know why you wouldn't at least consider the idea. But although Schulte did not seem to be as open to the idea as Melvin was.
The thing about Darvish, I think it's interesting is, and this slightly different way to move this topic is, when you talk to a lot of the minor league catchers, they will just tell you stories about Darvish that are amazing. The one I've heard, which is pretty well known, is he likes throwing batting practice to his son, and he doesn't want to throw it with his right arm, and he can throw left-handed at around 85 miles an hour, just screwing around. Another one that was good was when they had Brett Honeywell and he had the screwball, and Darvish asked how he threw it, and Honeywell goes, well, I just kind of, I can do it. It's kind of really unusual. It's a hard pitch. And Darvish kind of looks at the grip. Oh, like this. After about 3 pitches, he's throwing a perfect screwball. Honeywell's going, yeah, that's how you throw it.
Wow, thanks for making my entire career seem useless there.
It's just amazing all the different pitches he can throw. And we can probably talk all day about that. My wife is already bored hearing me talk about Sasaki too much.
Yeah, but Darvish is like pitcher Rain Man. He just boom, he's got it.
Yeah,
it's remarkable how that man's brain works.
I think that's the biggest thing that screwed up the Dodgers in the playoff series too, was just that Darvish could throw so many pitches. You didn't know what's coming, as compared to Dylan Cease, who has great stuff, but it was either going to be a fastball or a slider. And look at the home run that Ohtani hit. He hit something about 97 miles per hour on the inside part of the plate, and he pulled
the top of the zone.
Yeah. The amount of guys that can do that in Major League Baseball is very, very few.
But Darvish in that start, he made one bad pitch. The pitch to Hernandez, to Kike, was a bad pitch. The ball Hernandez hit out was not a bad pitch. Yeah. And it doomed him. It was just, I don't know what happened to the offense or what the Dodgers pitching staff was doing. It was literally one bad pitch in 6 2/3 innings.
But you did get to see Kike celebrate with Gavin Lux when they both bumped cups. So I guess that was kind of a side bonus to that. So
was it? I don't know if it was.
That's a memory we didn't need, John. Thanks.
Yes. All right.
Lauren chimes in, pivoting kind of to the minor league crew. Great to see you, Lauren. Is there anyone in the minors that you could see reinforcing the Padres this season? Do the Pods have anyone to help fill in injuries from the minors? And I think that's, one of the biggest questions. It's obviously like, what's the status of Vries? What can we expect for him? What can we expect for Salas? What does the roadmap look like for them in 2025? And then the secondary question, I think for a lot of people, would be, okay, who can we actually expect to provide some reinforcements if they need an arm, if they need a bat, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, one thing I tried to do in my top 30 was, as much as I like Vries and Salas, I think people kind of got to calm down. Like when you read people, listen to the radio and they say, well, if you re-sign Higashioka, I'm not sure if you do it for a year or 2 because Salas is just going to be up here in 2025 or 6. You don't know that. I think as we've talked about, Salas had a huge month in July of 2023. Last year he had about, I think if I got the numbers in front of me, he had about 206 in Fort Wayne. It doesn't mean he sucks. Doesn't mean he's a bust. It just means it's going to take a little bit of time and people need to calm down. You throw out that 1 month, he's hit 202. Now, Vries was really good, and he really started to come around in July after, kind of being a slow starter. And he should be fine in Fort Wayne. But both these guys are a couple of years. Now, to answer what Lauren said, probably in that top 10, we could get into Ryan Bergert a little bit. He has one of those induced vertical break fastballs that Derek and I have talked about numerous times with Hyrie or Archie. He can be really good depending upon where his arm slot is. He's kind of like, I think too many times people talk about Ruben Habla being able to solve everything. But this is one guy who we really could work with because, he has a really good fastball when his arm slot's in the right spot. He's got a good sweeper. He's got a decent changeup, a good hard slider. But as his manager in San Antonio, Luke Mons, pointed out, he can kind of get a little bit robotic. He can kind of get really locked into a certain game plan regardless of what's happening in the game. And he needs kind of to make adjustments and kind of pitch selection when he throws something or when he doesn't. And it's kind of funny because on that same staff this year, he had Victor Lizarraga, who is about the exact opposite, who can make an adjustment on, from pitch to pitch and the mound. He'll go inside and look on the iPad what's working. But, he also throws a low 90s fastball that can get to about 94, and he relies more on secondary stuff. So that's one guy could help. I mean, Tirso Analysis is someone that from Tijuana people have been talking about for a long time. This year he had his best year in El Paso, but, I'm not sure if that's enough of a bat really to kind of take over for Jurickson Profar in left field to be your everyday guy out there. Might be. I mean, he's also only 24. He could kind of go back to El Paso. I think one guy, last guy, probably it's a relief pitcher, but, I've been a big fan of the big man that we got from the Marlins, all 6'8" of them. Geez, I'm having like a senior moment.
Sean Reynolds.
Sean Reynolds. Jeez.
Yep.
Can't
Which
Sean a couple times
6'8" guy?
That dude would have been on the postseason roster if he didn't have the knee issue.
Yeah.
Like that dude's got some stuff.
The thing that's funny is he had about a 6.8 ERA in El Paso and about a 1 point. I think if I got it right here, he had about a 1.8 or something like that. In San Diego.
He punched out 21 hitters in 11
4.82.
innings in the major leagues last year and looks completely dominant doing it.
Yeah, the whole key with him is if he throws his slider in the zone. He's got 2 pitches, huge guy, very good athlete, was a position player for his first couple of years out of the Los Angeles area.
Yeah, he told me he had big power.
Yeah.
Yeah. That dude thinks he can win home run derbies, and maybe he can.
Yeah, he's a pretty relaxed guy. Very, very kind of California personality vibe that goes with him. I enjoyed talking with him in El Paso, but yeah, he's someone who's going to be given every chance to make the roster, and he could be very good. Alec Jacob, who doesn't qualify as a rookie because he spent more than 45 days on the roster. Someone, and a guy who's not on the list, who also spent most of the year in El Paso. I think he could be pretty good. Is Eggy Rosario, who might be the biggest little guy I've ever seen in my life. He's about 5'9", and like all of us, around 5% body fat, about 205, 210. I mean, he's just a monster. He's improved his lateral movement.
Still like Darren Sproles. Yeah, he's just this little powerhouse.
Yes. Funny guy. He has a very interesting personality. He's a fun guy to chat with. So those are 3 guys I would take a look at.
Yeah, so when you see a guy like Reynolds, where do you have him on your top 30?
I had him at 11. He's a relief pitcher, and I mean, when you say you have him at 11, it's not like these are really hard numbers. It just depends upon where you put, ceiling and floor and how much someone could eventually become. Like I look at a guy like Boston Bateman, the number 2 pick they got just up north. He was, I think, number 6 that I had him out there. He's a 6'8" left-hander who throws in the high 90s. He's never pitched an inning in professional baseball. Okay, he could eventually be a really dominant guy. Right now with Sean, I mean, I think it's the ceiling and floor the floor is pretty high. I think Sean will be in the major leagues. I think he'll be in the bullpen this year. I think it'll help someone. Maybe could be something more, maybe a closer or more innings. But, with guys like Boston Bateman, there's just a lot to dream on. And so that's kind of how you look at that. That's how I look at it a little bit.
With a guy like Reynolds, I'm asking, had he not had that cup of coffee in the major leagues, would that have had a major influence on where you had him ranked? Because I mean, Schulte even told me after, I think it was second or third outing, he's like, this guy's earning my trust. So when you got a vote of confidence from the skipper like that, how does that impact the way that you look at, projectability for a guy?
Yeah, that influenced me a lot. And that influenced, even when I was talking to him in El Paso, he pointed out that just, he said, the interview we have on MadFriars with him is, I think he made a really good point. He said, once you get to the major leagues, it's all about, I'm here and I'm just here to help my team win that day. And you got the crowd, you get the adrenaline, and he's kind of a hyper guy. I mean, he likes to chat. He's a good interview. Yep. And he said that's kind of different at the minors, where it's still a little bit about development. You're still kind of more worried about how you're doing compared to everybody else. And while it's important to win, kind of the development is first. He goes, you get to the major league, it's all one thing, win. And that's a big part of it. But, kind of a guy who's similar to that, who's further down the list, who could be a big surprise coming up this year is Braden Nett. I mean, he's a guy that if he does pop, you will hear the Padres justifiably talk about him a lot, because he's a guy who was an undrafted free agent. The Padres signed him after just seeing him pitch in, I think, the Appy League, which is kind of like a pre-scouting workout place. And he didn't really even pitch that much this year. And then he pitched in Fort Wayne just in August, and he was just dominant. I mean, he has a big high 90s fastball, a decent slider, change and curve are coming along. But I mean, anytime you start off with that, you can throw a high 90s fastball up in the zone, it's like, okay, we can work with that. Let's see where we go. And he'll be at San Antonio this year. So he's someone that could kind of pop up, pretty quick. But as I said, if you're looking at it from a prospect way, I think Lake Elsinore is going to be probably the most interesting team, in the system this year. You're going to have around $10 million in signing bonuses in the starting rotation that'll kind of be up there at some time during the year, and Cash Mayfield and Boston Bateman, Humberto Cruz, who they got in the international market, Cannon Kemp and Dane Lease from last year, who were, high money draft picks, especially Cannon Kemp, great name. Texas Prep got about $600K, had kind of some shoulder problems. Supposedly he's fine to go now. He should be up
with a K, by the way.
They
knew he was going to be a pitcher. They've started his name with a K.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need an extra K in there, so we'll just go with the two that are there. So that's fine. And then you got
hopefully his middle name is not Keith.
Yes, let's hope so. And
Keith
then
with a C.
you're gonna have a huge third baseman, Cale Fountain, but he had Tommy John in October, so he should mainly be a DH for pretty much, I'd say, half the year. And then you had the other kid from North Carolina who they got in the draft.
Bob Hightower.
Cole Hightower. Gosh, now I'm going to get so much grief from the rest of MadFriars guys for forgetting these.
Did you write your top 30, or did somebody else
write it? I did write it, and then Charity's going to go up to Jay and go, man, maybe it's time to take the keys away from John. So Grandpa's had enough of doing this.
Jacob's excited to hear that Lake Elsinore is going to be the place to be. He lives next door, and shout out to Annie's Cafe. I was just telling my wife, Laura, I was like, hey, next time we drive through Elsinore, I hear about this coffee cake. So we're going to have to stop and get the coffee cake.
Coffee cake, and they got a great English breakfast. So that's something that you got to go for. I mean, you can just sit down and have your 3,000 calories in one sitting.
Did you mention? Did I miss Henry Baez, because he's high on your list, and you mention him as a guy that could be a mid-year addition to the rotation if need be?
Yeah, he is. He's a 6'3", 205. He's from the Dominican, and he's one guy where the Padres really rave about his makeup. His father was a coach in the Dominican. And, his English is coming along pretty well. He's a real good guy and working with the Latin pitchers. As far as on the field, his fastball's kind of picked up a couple notches, pretty good. He's got a 4 and 2-seam fastball. Doesn't throw a changeup, throws a splitter, which has really helped him with lefties. Yeah, he is definitely also someone to watch. I mean, I kind of like Bergert a little bit more, but I will say this. I think Baez is probably a better bet He's probably a little more consistent. I think Burgert has a little bit more upside, but as I said, you're going to see some nights with Burgert where he's going to strike out 10 guys in about 6 innings. Then other nights it's going to go 3, and a few of them are going to go over the wall. So, I mean, it just depends how much his fastball is moving.
So he sounds like a good sixth starter to me.
Yeah, we'll kind of see where Waldron ends up. I saw Waldron pitch a little bit at the end of last year in El Paso, and which is a really tough place for a guy who's trying to throw the knuckleball more in places where the ball doesn't move as much, and when it does move, it flies through the air at a quicker rate. So I think with Waldron, a lot of things are just going to be, and this is really easy for me to say and write, just how much confidence that he has in throwing it, which is just huge. It's really a tough thing with a lot of players.
Any surprise a guy like Brandon Valenzuela, the catcher, not put on the 40-man roster? They have 3 spots left. Or is one of those guys you look at like, yeah, probably no one's going to take him. He'll be okay.
Yeah, I think a lot of the Rule 5 draft is just about where you think someone would be taken. I mean, it's no, having Baez, Cruz, and Burgert all on there, you could see some team that's tanking, just stick them in the back of a bullpen and that they'd be fine. And keeping him there. Yeah, Brandon's always a guy who pitchers love to throw to. I mean, pretty good sized kid, 6'3", 225, switch hitter. He probably had his worst offensive season up in El Paso. He's probably profiles more as a backup. I don't know if he's going to have enough of a bat really to be an everyday player, but he's someone that they've always really liked, especially his game calling is exceptional.
Adam mentions Hightower and Baseball America being high on him. You wrote just kind of defensively, maybe more consistency than DeVries offers at this point. He can provide, quality offensively, defensively as well. A couple years older than Leo DeVries, but kind of playing the same position at like a similar stage. Like how are you going to be watching kind of their trajectory as they go forward? One, obviously the big name, flashy prospect. Another guy, lesser known, but could be a guy for you down the line.
Yeah, I mean, he's about a year older. He's, was a high school senior. DeVries would have been high school junior last year. So, yeah, it's fairly close. He was kind of a guy that shocked our guys we usually talk to on the draft, Jim Callis and Carlos Collazo from Baseball America and MLB Pipeline, because they hadn't really heard of him. And that's a guy that the Padres, just were really on. And, I mean, it shows how much that it shows the difference in how much these major league teams, when they're investing a type of money, the Padres, I think they estimate their scout in that area saw him 15 times. And I remember talking to him a few years ago, like when they drafted Ryan Weathers, they sent the guy out there to watch him play basketball 4 times. So, I mean, it's just amazing the amount of research and background they do him. Baseball America, a lot of their stuff on how much they liked him was in the bridge leagues, which is right after they draft, they bring the guys out to the complex and they kind of arrange for different minor league organizations to come in and watch them play. I think you can see some things, but it's kind of like me going to spring training and looking at the backfields where they're just pretty much throwing fastballs and a lot of the middle of the plate and talking about this guy's going to be the next blah, blah, blah. It's a lot different when they get in full season leagues and pitchers have more command than control. They have a change-ups. They got their breaking pitches going. But, yeah, there's a lot to like about him. And, Fountain is the type of guy we've been hoping they've been taking for a long time. He's 18. He's, 6'5", 230 already. They think they can keep him at third, maybe first base. He has, at least before the surgery, he had enough of an arm to play both corners in the outfield. Big guy, could put some ball in the seats. I mean, I like when they take chances on guys like that. And there's also a good story in the local paper how, he was taken, I think, in about the 5th round, and there were different teams calling him up like, hey, will you take this money? No. And then finally the Padres came in and, whether they had the right money or the right organization or maybe a combination of both, he decided to go with them. And it was a really interesting pick that I liked a lot.
Well, is he the guy, if I recall correctly, set the Nebraska State home run record?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he set the career record in his junior year of high school.
Yeah.
So that's a record that's never going to be touched. So he's one of those dudes, one of those, big swing, lots of pop. Is there? I assume there's a strikeout or 20 in there, but you take that to go along with the ridiculous power that he shows. He's the modern day Rob Deere.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be it's just the thing is what you're looking at with a lot of these guys at like Elsinore, and some of the write-ups on there were I was kind of quoting a lot of Baseball America or as MLB Pipeline just because I didn't know. And then when you read that, it's like, okay, he's going to go from playing in high school ball in Nebraska, and no offense to Nebraska, just playing professionally in low A. That's a jump. I mean, so you just kind of got to be patient with the person and hope they can get a lot going. I mean, Chris Kemp, who's the Padres director of scouting, had a great comment is when the Padres were really high on Jackson Merrill, they were out and Darnay would know this in Severna Park, watching him play against a guy throwing 70 miles an hour. And Kemp was telling me, he's going, okay, how am I supposed to evaluate this? And, they had some things with him and they liked a lot of the intangibles with him. So they weren't afraid to take him in the first round and still were able to get James Wood in the second, which was an incredibly productive draft.
But I was really hoping that Merrill would play at John Sherholtz Park on the campus of Towson University, but it didn't quite work out that way.
Well, I mean, he could already write both his first and last name, so education would have been redundant.
That's true. That's true. This might be a question for you, Derek. Do the Padres utilize the PLNU lab with any of their minor league players?
They do. Yes, they do bring him in there every now and again. In fact, they'll have quite a few of their top guys come in early on after they get drafted, kind of show them the lay of the land. And they do it not so much to evaluate them as much as they do to just show them this is the kind of stuff you might want to start thinking about, getting them inundated and starting them learning how to implement analytics and all these different types of things. So it's more like just a introductory course on how things really work. And then they actually did bring Ethan Salas out there because it's not just the pitching lab. They do, offensive stuff there too. They brought him out there in the middle of the year when he was struggling. And after he went back, he started to really pick things up a little bit more and then carry that into the Arizona Fall League. So yeah, they do that with their minor league guys, not nearly as extensively, but it certainly is for their top prospects, a tool they will let them use.
Well, he did carry it to an extent. I mean, when he came back, he had his best month in Fort Wayne. That's where he hit 255. And then in the Arizona Fall League, he was around 228. So, I mean, the thing with Ethan, I think, is that when I came on, I think about a year ago, I think with just Darnay, and I was raving about how much I liked Ethan Salas. The big difference I saw between what he did then and in Fort Wayne was all throughout last year's spring training, it was kind of, well, we don't know how long Ethan will be here. He'll probably be in San Antonio just really quick. And even when I was out there in June, they were telling me, well, when he gets hot, he's going to do this. And he was not, from all accounts, he wasn't that pleased about going to Fort Wayne. He kind of thought he would go to San Antonio. That's what I think. I don't know that. So I want to be sure on that. And I think he kept looking in the first couple months like he was trying to hit a 5-run home run too much. He was just really aggressive early in the count. One thing that made him so good in Lake Elsinore was he was just real patient. He had a good idea what he was trying to do, what pitches he could hit, what he was trying to drive. And I think, and there's going to be some disagreements among the MadFriars family about this, is I think Ethan Salas, best case scenario is he's a really good defensive catcher. He's a guy that can drive the ball in the gaps. He can kind of do a high on-base percentage. He's not someone who's going to hit about 25 or 30 home runs. And believe me, if he hits about, pretty well significantly above 250 with a 320 or 330 on base with his defensive skills, that's an all-star. I mean, really, catching is just an incredibly difficult position to do. I mean, when you go out to the minor leagues and you interact with these guys and you see this guy sitting in a pitcher's meeting, then they got some crazy guy from the organization having him do defensive drills where he's taking a fungo bat from about 30 feet and he's working on his blocking. And then you got to go catch 9 innings. And then, you're expected to hit. And I mean, it is just really, it's a lot to ask for someone, especially that young. So, I mean, I'm not really sure what they're going to do with Ethan to start the year. I think I need a little bit more information and reporting on that. I see the question down there. I think it's kind of up in there where Salas starts. I think Salas could be. I think defensively he's ready for San Antonio. I would think offensively I'd rather see him at Fort Wayne. But I think if you're going to put him at Fort Wayne, you need to tell him, like kind of what they did with Jackson Merrill is, look, just get on base. Don't make outs. Try to make good contact. Don't worry about trying to hit the ball over the wall, and you'll be fine. If he's up there telling him you're going to hit your way up to San Antonio, it could be a repeat of what he had before. For the question just popped up, no, DeVries is going to be, I think DeVries is going to be at Fort Wayne. That's where he should start. I don't think they'll send him back to Elsinore. I'm definitely sure he will not start at San Antonio.
Yeah, for the audio audience, by the way, the question was from Nathan DeVore. Do Salas and DeVries both start at Double-A in the beginning of the year?
No. DeVries, I think, starts in Fort Wayne, where he'll learn to experience what snow is, being from the Dominican Republic, which is always a fascinating thing about northeastern Indiana in April, which is wonderful.
And now people remember too, Ethan Salas turned 18 years old 5 months ago.
Yes.
So he's playing against guys who were 4 or 5 years, well above him. Plus, and John, you and I both talked to him. He's a defense first guy. His mentality is, I'm here to help my pitchers. And then the offense is going to be what the offense is. So when he's putting that much into, and Pete Zamora, when he was with Lake Elsinore, raved about the way the guy handled his pitching staff and cared about his arms. So that's his first priority now, is learning how to play defense as a professional. But I have no doubt he's so darn athletic, the bat's going to come at some point. And you're right. If he just lays the bat on the ball as a high OBP guy, he'll hit you 270 with a OPS in the low 700s, but he's not going to hit for a lot of power, but he's on base all damn day. He's athletic to steal second and third base. So just get on base and let your athletic ability take over.
The thing is, but when you're out there with the Padres, they will say that even to a greater extent than Derek just said about the catchers. Like, we don't really care what they hit. It's all about taking care of the pitchers and blah, 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 and this and this. But, I always notice the guys who hit as the catchers, the guys aren't getting to play. The reality doesn't really match the rhetoric. Probably one of the best defensive catchers I've ever seen the Padres have is Chandler Siegel, who had a brief call-up last year, was a catcher at El Paso for this year, part-time. He can't hit. I love Chandler. He hit like about 180 in college. He is that good a defensive catcher. But, until he hits, it's really tough to play somebody, I guess, unless you're Austin Hedges, who has made a career out of doing this, who doesn't hit that much. And the thing about Ethan Salas is, his defense, like Derek says, the first thing I noticed when I got to talk to him in spring training before they kind of had the media ban on him, he was really pretty calm. He was very relaxed. His hands move really well. He has a little bit of problem sometimes with the upper ball up in the zone defensively. But, I like his approach at the plate, and I just like him to get back to that, because I think, I agree with Derek, what he said 100%. If he's up above like 270, I think 275, I could see him hitting that, have a really high on base. That's fine. We are all really, really happy with that. And one guy I hope we get to chat a little bit about is a bit of a dark horse. I like Romeo Sanabria quite a bit. I'm not sure if you guys got a chance to see him. He's a lot of fun to watch.
I've not seen him yet. Give a scouting report.
He's number 5 on your list.
Right.
I was just looking at him.
Yeah, he was an 18th round pick by the Padres in 2022 as a catcher out of a JC in Florida, Indian Rivers JC, same place where Corey Spangenberg went. He was a catcher, kind of got hurt, and then they made a decision to move him to first base, left-hand hitter. And, he led the ACL in hitting all these categories. Last year, they gave him a chance to play every day at Lake Elsinore, had a really good year there, promoted him to Fort Wayne, and then they got him up to Double-A. And he pretty much, I thought he was pretty good up there. And the thing that really impresses me about Sanabria, and I was careful not to write this, or I could just see how that's going to be misconstrued, is he has a really, really good hit tool. He's a left-right guy, and he has the ability that if you watched him in Lake Elsinore, where it's on 2 strikes, he can sit there and flick the outside pitch right over the 5.5 hole all day. And if you throw it to him early in the count, a strike, especially on the inside, he's looking to drive the ball and do some serious damage. So he needs to get in a little bit better shape. I mean, hopefully he can show he can play a little bit of left field. He definitely has the arm to do that. I think he can eventually move. He hasn't really gotten a chance to do that. We'll see how well he does against, better pitching over a longer period of time in the Texas League. But I think that hit tool is so important. And I mean, when you look at what Jackson Merrill did this year, the first 2 months, I mean, he was okay. I mean, he was good, especially for learning a new position and all the other things he had to do. But what really was a big difference for Jackson was he could sit there and just take the outside pitch and flick it all day. And then when guys started to throw it inside, that's when you saw the home runs. But I think everything kind of starts with that. And Romeo really has a great approach. He is a lot of fun to talk hitting with.
Yeah, I'm watching some of his video right now, and I like the hands.
Yes. His father's from Puerto Rico, but the family's from Cuba. He went into this whole thing when I talked to him at spring training about how he would have a daily practice with like a broomstick, and they'd flick Gabbana beans at him, then lids and pennies, and that's how he really, really learned just to make really good contact. And the thing too that stands out about him is there's some guys, especially at the low A level, that are really good at making contact with all sorts of pitches. They get up to double A and they still kind of have that approach, but they start getting a lot of weak contact. Romeo has an idea about what pitch he wants to hit. And he's really tough to strike out because he kind of spreads out and he can flick the thing over all day. Now, and the thing is, if you get it up on him a little bit on the outside corner, he has no problem heading up against the left field wall. The place where he's a little vulnerable, but he's getting a lot better, is if you throw him an inside fastball.
Yep.
He can get beyond that sometimes, but he's getting much better at that, and he's been taking that over. He's been pulling that to right field. And it's like a low line drive missile that goes over there. So he's someone that I like a lot because of the hit tool. I'm a big fan of his on that.
Yeah, just looking at the thing, I just watched a video of his first double-A home run.
Yeah.
Fastball in, not down on fastball in, but he was right on time. His hands, he just threw his hands, let the hands do the work.
Yeah.
And then I looked at another video of him hitting a couple of singles the opposite way, and it was the exact same approach. Wait for the ball, let it travel a little bit deeper, let your hands do the work. So when you got a guy who just has the ability to let his body and his hands work in unison to get to the ball wherever it is in the strike zone, that's a dude who is going to be able to get on base quite a bit. And you're right. The body frame looks like the power is in there. I think you just identified another John Conniff special, a dude who many people realize it, but you nailed one.
Well, I thought he was funny. I asked him how he got to be a left-handed hitter because he throws right-handed. He said he went up there the first time in Little League. He struck out right-handed. He goes, "Dad, I think I'm better left-handed." His father goes, "Okay." So he goes to the left-handed. He hits a double. Dad goes, "You're a left-handed hitter." And then he just kind of move on.
It works out pretty well for Shohei Ohtani, Ted Williams.
Yes.
There's some dudes on that list.
Ty Cowboy did not see play, but yes, he was a famous guy too.
Nathan asks if his floor is Rowdy Tellez with a slightly better contact tool.
He's got a better body than Rowdy. Yeah, so I mean,
he's not quite as. Yeah,
we're not going to throw him under the bus. Yeah, I think with him, the downside on him, the negative would be, if he's a first base only prospect, that's a really tough road to the major leagues, and that's probably what David J., who gave me a lot of grief for putting him at number 5, will probably say to me. But I mean, to me, that hit tool and the ability to get on base is enough to kind of keep you at the big league level for a while. And I think he has the ability to turn on the pitch because, he's looking early in the count. If he sees a pitch on the outside corner, he can flick it to left field, but that's not what he wants to do. He feels he can do that all day. What he wants to do early in the count before 2 strikes, he's looking to hammer the ball. So guys like that are just a lot of fun to talk to and an idea what they're looking at. And I'm really looking forward to seeing him again.
All we need, John, is him to be the next Nathan Martorella. Then we can flip him for another Luis Arise.
Yeah, that's what we were chatting about too, is that, all of us go out and we meet these guys. And, I know Derek's talked to quite a few of them too. And, like Robbie Snelling is a good example. Is a wonderful kid. If my kid was anywhere near that, I'd just be over the moon. But you also have to see these guys if you're going to be a general manager, and it's not really a currency, but but kind of as a stock because they go up and down. A good example is, the trade for Dylan Lesko, or they got Jason Adam came back at the trade deadline. That trade wouldn't have been made at the beginning of the year. That would have been light. So Lesko's stock was going down. He really struggled in the spring. He was struggling pretty bad in Fort Wayne, and people could see that. I mean, a quick tangent. When Darren Smith used to have a show, anytime when the Padres were in the tanking mode, I would get a call about, who's this guy at Anderson Espinosa or who's Mejia, and I'd go on and I could give kind of, an informed answer. I knew who they were, what they did, but I wasn't really watching a lot of Akron Zips games, so I couldn't really break down what they were doing. But if you're asking about Dylan Lesko, it's like, okay, well, I saw him pitch his first bullpen in the spring. David J saw him pitch his second. Kevin Charity, David J, and I also saw him pitch multiple times at Lake Elsinore. We saw him pitch in spring. We saw him get hit hard in spring. We watched most of his games because we write the dailies about all the starts. We were aware of that. And so I'm not saying Dylan's bad. He's not going to make it or this. But for whatever reason, it wasn't working in San Diego, and he wasn't going to be a top 100 guy coming up. So the Padres, AJ Preller, I thought, made an informed decision. I need to get someone now who can help the big league team win, who can give the team a chance to make to the World Series. Homer Bush is a wonderful defensive player, probably better defensively than I thought Marcy was, and Robert Hassel, but probably the worst hitter of all those three by far. So you're going to have to completely rework that swing because that won't work in Double-A, let alone the major leagues. JD Gonzalez was good, but JD had a bad knee injury, hadn't really played in his senior year. Was kind of treading water somewhat, which is not bad in Lake Elsinore, but that's like 3 or 4 years down the line. So that's a good trade to make. So when I say I was okay with the Lesko deal, it's, I'm not trying to, that's more of a knowledgeable decision. I'd seen him pitch a lot. I mean, It'd be fine to have back here again, but after a while, it's kind of time to cut bait.
Yeah. The walk numbers we're climbing and not coming back down. And if you come back from a Tommy John, that often does happen, but 3 months in, they're still not coming back down. And I would pop on the MILB app and watch a couple of the starts. I'm going, he just don't look right.
The thing is, the last game, Kevin Charity and I both went to the game, and he looked really good. Fastball command was a little spotty, but pretty good. He had a really good changeup. His curve was really good, and he showed a decent slider. Then for some reason, he got the curve and the slider kind of mixed up, and then off came the fastball command. And when I saw him in Fort Wayne in early June, he wasn't even throwing his breaking pitch. So he got, in the first inning, he got 2 strikeouts off the changeup, and then, maybe Derek Torgerson, the pitching coach, goes in there and screams at his guys, hey, he can't throw a breaking pitch. Lay off the changeup. Unless you see a strike fastball, that's what we're swinging at, and he gave up 7 runs in that inning. They just pounded that because when he had to kind of get forced to throw the ball over the plate when they wouldn't chase that, the velo went down a little bit on the fastball, and he was getting hit.
You start aiming it that way, right? You say, I just got to get this over. You're not just throwing out. You can throw it with conviction.
Robbie Snelling, had a great year the year before, but his velocity was down considerably. I mean, he was throwing it around 90 or 91 miles an hour, and he has a decent changeup. His slider's not quite there yet. So that's another one when you're kind of looking, going, okay, well, maybe it'll go back up, but I got a chance really to go for it right now. Now you do that trade. So, a lot of these guys we're talking about, maybe if someone's a smart ass, you could sit there and say, we're looking at all the guys they could trade. That could be it. But you can't make trades unless you have the guys to do the trades. So I would see it that way.
A few other names before we let you go in the chat. Question about Yendry Rojas, Daniel Montesino. Could they make a jump to prospect level this upcoming year? Brandon Butterworth, Kai Roberts. Exciting players, very athletic. Anybody else? No, those are the two.
Kai Roberts is a guy I put at the bottom. I liked him quite a bit. I mean, he's a guy. The one thing about the Padres, from what I understand, when you talk to people like at Baseball America and MLB Pipeline, the Padres really value scouts. I mean, they like having all the video out there, but they're one of the fewer and fewer organizations. They want to know what their scouts think of these guys, and they like sending guys to different places. Kai Roberts, the guy out of the University of Utah. I think David talked to him in Lake Elsinore. I'm looking forward to seeing him in Fort Wayne. University of Utah is about 6'5". Stole a lot of bases, has some speed, can play all three outfield positions, left-handed hitter. That's some look at. Butterworth, he's a guy they got, I think, out of Florida State. Yeah, I mean, we can see what he can do. Daniel Montesino, if I remember right, is a left-hand hitter out of Venezuela. He was trying a lot of kind of different things with his swing. I'm not sure if he's going to do much. Yendry Rojas, I really don't know a whole lot about, so I'd kind of pass on that one a little bit.
What do we have you on here for, John? If you can't give us the full breakdown of Yendry Rojas,
there's like 165 guys on the roster and about 180 they can keep. And I think each year
you got the 178 and Rojas is 179. Thanks, John.
Yes, I mean, God, when we get in these horrible debates about who's number 79 or who's number 80 or something like that, someone once on one of the sites rated like the top 75 Padre prospects, and we were. After we got finished being a bunch of smart-ass jerks like we can be, we point out that really, even when you do the top 30, the big list we always do is right before spring training, which is the top 20. And so if you're more of a casual fan of what's going on here, look, if you know about the top 10 guys and maybe 10 after that, you're going to be fine. Okay? If someone's way down that list, you're going to be very well aware that they're coming up and what they're going to be doing.
It's like the NCAA tournament. Like if you're arguing over what team is 68 and what team is 69, that team's not winning the national title anyway. So just don't worry about it. Yeah. Play better next year.
Yeah, I think a lot of guys like doing this. They like talking about, I saw this guy at the Dominican Summer League, and then I'll remind someone I said that first or this. And if you're looking, God, what did John say about 2 podcasts ago? I think he's wrong on this. Hey, just listen to my podcast just right now. I'll say plenty of things that are stupid or idiotic that you'll be able to catch.
Which is why we love you, because we do the same thing.
John, what do you want to plug?
What do I plug? I mean, we have another top 30 come out. Ben Davey, depending on how much turkey he eats at Thanksgiving, we'll have one coming up pretty quick. Then we should have the other 3 that'll be popping up. And then we'll go out to spring training. We kind of take it easy during the spring, during the winter. We don't write the top 7 first basemen in the Padres system. It's just not something I want to read, or anybody else really should either. And it's still $5 a month, $40 for the year, and we're looking forward to having full coverage next year. And hopefully, I'll see you guys out at spring training this year.
Subscribe and buy John a meal. He deserves it.
Yes.
Right. Unfortunately, our
good meals are.
Yeah, unfortunately, Peoria, Arizona, despite our mutual friend Marty Caswell, who likes Olive Garden for some reason.
Oh my God, why?
I was on Darren's show one time. One of the few times my wife listened to me speak. She heard me
just in general
take some shots at Olive Garden with Marty. And since my wife lived in Pacific Beach, like Marty, she said, "You know what? Next time you make fun of that, I mean, we're going to go out to Virginia. We're going to take our daughter there. And you think she'll want to go there every single week and have breadsticks and soup and salad. So unless you say something nice." And so I thought, I don't even know why anyone goes to Tuscany, when you can have, Hospitaliano.
Look, I will say, Laura's grandmother passed away not long ago at the age of like 96. Strong woman that hung on for dear life. And they got the little family gathering catered by Olive Garden. Got lasagnas. Got to say, those lasagnas did not suck.
I worked at one in grad school for a couple months and as a bartender, and that was the only time they'd offer me free food, and I'd say, I'm fine. Thank you, guys. I'm okay.
Could not pay me to eat pasta that's cooked in unsalted water.
Oh, yeah. So we can
No.
we can talk about food one day. Hopefully, you can convince your bosses to send you guys out to El Paso or even
we have trouble getting okay to go to Los Angeles, John.
Yeah. El Paso, we could have some tremendous Mexican food.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in on L&J Cafe any day of the week.
Yeah. Oh, yes, definitely better places. Well, thank you very much for having me on, guys. I always appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. You're the best, John. Appreciate it, and have a wonderful Thanksgiving week.
You too. Bye-bye.
Subscribe to MadFriars, people.